Nice, welcome back. So, in the previous video, we had a look at all the different ways you can plot these coordinates, okay? So, let's just add in one or two little caveats here. If I want to find the distance from any point to any other point, I could get out a ruler and try and figure it out. In fact, I have a very large ruler here that could try and do it for me. You know, the problem is that's grand on a piece of paper. It's not grand if this was a map and you wanted to find the distance from Dublin to Tokyo. You'd either have to get out and measure it or have some other mathematical way of figuring out the distance between 2 points. And this is where the maths comes in. So I'm going to take these 2 points A and D and I'm going to show you how to find the distance or the length of the line that would join these 2 points. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the point A. So A is 2 and 5. Remember, this is the way I write them, x followed by y. And I'm going to write down the point D. And the point D is 5 and minus 4. Now, there will be a formula on page 18 of your log tables. I'm going to write down the formula, and we're going to use that formula in conjunction with these 2 sets of coordinates to find the distance or the length. Okay, so the formula is as follows. It's a big giant square root, and then you open a bracket, and then you replace this value x2 with a number, and you subtract it from another value, and then you square it, and then you add it to take another value, take it away from another value, and square it. So these 4 values will become the 4 numbers from my sum, and that will allow me to find the distance. The question is, how do you do it? Okay, you need to know what these 4 values are. Now, you don't randomly put in the numbers. Instead, we know that the first number in each of these is the x value. So I'm going to call one of them x1 and the other one x2. Now, when I say x1, it's x with a tiny little 1 at its foot, not x1 with a 1 on the front. Okay? So, the same thing here. We know they're both y values, so we'll call this one y1 and this one y2. And because we've designated each of them to be one of those variables, I can now replace them here. Now be careful, everything else stays the same. So that minus stays there, even if there's another minus, and those squareds stay there. So really that's going to be the square root, open a bracket, x2 minus x1, close bracket, square it, plus open bracket, y2 minus 4 minus y1, close bracket, square it. So what does that work out as? Well, you can use your calculator or you can do it old school. Old school would be 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. Plus minus 4 minus 5 is minus 9. Minus 9 squared is 81. That is the square root of 90. Now, your calculator might try and turn that into another number. And in fact, I can check on my calculator to see does it do that. Some calculators will and some calculators won't. So the square root of 90 doesn't, so I'll leave it as the square root of 90. Do not try and give a decimal answer unless they specify a decimal answer or a whole number answer. That is the distance between A and D, or it's the length of the line AD that joins those 2 points. Okay, so now that you've found the distance between those 2 points, we're now going to look at what's halfway between those 2 points. So this will use another formula. So again, I'm just going to write down the 2. A is 2, 5, and D is 5 minus 4, and still going to label them x1, y1, x2 and y2, and now we're going to find halfway between them. And again, you could get a ruler out and you could try and work out halfway, but again, on page 18 of your log tables there is a formula, and that formula says that I can create a giant formula for just a new one of these that's halfway between them. Somewhere in here there's a number that's halfway between 2 and 5 and between 5 and minus 4. So how do I do it? Well, I just add my 2 x values and I half the answer, and do the same with the 2 y values and half the answer. So I'm going to replace that now. x1 plus x2, so 2 plus 5 divided by 2, and then we have y1 plus y2, 5 plus minus 4 divided by 2. So 2 plus 5 is 7. That's 7 over 2, or 3.5. And 5 plus minus 4 is 5 minus 4, which is 1, which is a half. So halfway between those 2 points is 3.5 and a half. And that's true. You don't have to measure it. It's always going to be true for the midpoint. Okay? Now, once you've got the midpoint, the next standard one you need to know is the slope. So the best way to think of slope is, imagine starting off on the ground, and then imagine a hill, and then imagine a bigger hill, and a bigger hill, and each time that hill gets steeper, the measure of that steepness is called the slope. So obviously the lowest slope you can have is no slope, which is 0. Okay? So as the slope gets bigger, it gets harder to climb. And then you can have a positive or negative slope. So for example, this is a positive slope because I'm walking up the hill. Look, I'm walking up the hill. Okay? But you could also have a negative slope. You could be at the top of a hill and you're going down. And as you go down, it gets less steep and less steep until you're on the flat. So if you're going down the hill, you're going to have a negative slope. And if you're going uphill, you're going to have a positive slope. Okay, so how do you get the slope? Well, it's a very simple formula. Again, I'm going to use A and D. A is 2, 5, and D is 5 and minus 4. And again, I'm going to go x1, y1, x2, y2. And how am I going to get the slope? Well, the formula for slope is simple. It's take away the 2 y values and then take away the 2 x values, and you get a fraction. Now, the symbol for slope is a small m for slope. It's not S, it's small m. So, let's put the numbers in. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So again, use your calculator. Minus 4 minus 5 is minus 9. Divide, you can do this all in one go, over 5 minus 3, which is 2. So the slope there is minus, never turn the slope into a mixed number. Always keep it as a fraction. So the slope there is minus 9 over 2, which means it's negative. Okay? And if you go back and look at our original one, you can see that if I draw a line from there down to there, I'm going down the way. In other words, I'm falling. That means it's a negative slope. Okay? So that's how you get the slope. Now, you need the slope to do the next bit. So, imagine you have your line between A and D. Okay? And we have our slope. We know that the slope between those 2 points is minus 9 over 2. Okay? Sometimes it's a whole number, sometimes it's a positive or negative whole number, but lots of the times it's a fraction. So we need to figure out an equation that tells me all that information in one go. Okay? And all you need is one of the points. So I'm going to use the point A, which is 2 and 5. And I'm going to use the slope, which is minus 9 over 2. So all I do, as before, label it x1, y1. I've only got one pair, so I only go x1, y1. I don't go x2, y2 because there's no other one to add. The formula on page 18 for the equation of a line is y minus y1 is equal to m bracket x minus x1. Now be careful. That y, that minus, that m, that x, that minus, they're built in. So the only thing you're popping in is that number for x1, that number for y1, and replace the m with your slope. So you watch me do it. The y stays the same, that stays the same. I'm putting in a 5 is equal to minus 9 over 2. The bracket stays the same, the x stays the same, the minus stays the same, and then put in the 2. So anything in red stayed the same from the formula. Anything in black, sorry, that's meant to be in red. Anything in black was what I moved in from my pair and my slope. Now, when you have a fraction, this is what you do. Bottom of the fraction, multiply by the left-hand side, and the top of the fraction multiplied by the right-hand side. So watch, I'm going to multiply the 2 by the left, and I'm going to multiply the top, the minus 9, by the right. And that suddenly gets rid of the fraction, and now I've got a linear. 2y minus 10 is equal to minus 9x plus 18. Now, you have to get all the numbers and letters to the same side. How you decide is you decide based on this. If that is positive, if that was plus 9, I move the 2 of these over to this side. Because that's negative, I move the 2 of these over to this side. So when I add 9x to both sides, I get 9x plus 2y. And when I take away 18 from both sides, I'm going to take away an 18 from there, and I'm going to take away an 18 from here. So that's minus 28, and I'm left with 0. And that is the equation of the line we started with.